Today, I'd like to continue our spiritual journey with George Harrison, the famous Beatle, who has been on this pilgrimage to really embrace a different way of looking at life, a different way of finding truth, way that many people found a little bit odd that he would kind of search in India for those spiritual values. But George was very attracted, and at this point in our looking at George, he has just gone with Ravi Shankar to back to India and really experienced a sense of Krishna consciousness and realized that a good way for him to relate to God was through music. So he returned, and he was working now, not as a Beatle, working on his next album. He had several very successful albums initially. His next album that he worked on was called Dark Horse. Unfortunately, this album got the worst reviews of his career. It was panned, the critics hated this album. His Dark Horse tour, accompanying the album in 1974, proved to be a very difficult tour for him. Many of his fans did not care for the Indian music that he was playing. They liked him as a Beatle. They loved his Beatle music. That's what they wanted to hear. When they went to the concerts and they heard his, Indian music, that didn't sit well with them. Ravi and his friends did the Indian music really at the beginning of his concert. And they were just kind of sitting there, kind of like, okay, we'll go through this part. And really, what we want is the Beatles songs. And 3 weeks into the tour, unfortunately, Ravi was hospitalized with stomach problems, and he had to leave the tour, so that made it even worse. George's voice gave out, which compounded it. So no Ravi Shankar with the Indian music, George hardly able to sing. On Long Island, when he was touring, John Lennon came backstage to congratulate him. And George threw his glasses down in anger because John did not participate in the Bangladesh concert. So there was this kind of nasty confrontation between John and George. So you can see some hard feelings here. George wanted John to participate in the Bangladesh tour or the Bangladesh concert. He did not, so there was this animosity there. But I think, you look at that and you say, well, you're trying to find God and different spirituality. Why are you feeling this animosity? Couldn't you get over it? Was part of his frustration here at this point in his tour that the tour wasn't going well, that he was not feeling good with his voice, that Ravi wasn't part of it, the fans didn't like it, his Dark Horse album got panned. All of these negative vibrations were there. And of course, George is trying to be prayerful, trying to bring God more into his life, trying to pray more, engage with Krishna, with mantras, but a real struggle at this point. George was disappointed. He realized that people did not want the spiritual George. No, they wanted the Beatle George. So it's like, this isn't working. Well, my fans want one thing. I'm on a different path. They're not understanding. They weren't connecting with it. George did not tour again after this experience, which we can frankly say was a disaster on many levels, for 20 years. So obviously, this left a very bad taste in his mouth. Also, Bright Times Music Corporation brought a suit against George for copyright infringement. And they claim that My Sweet Lord plagiarized their 1963 song, He's So Fine. So, this was a further issue that George had to deal. He felt bad and the disappointment with the tour, the album, and now he's being sued, and the fans don't like it. You can see all of these difficulties in his life. Very, very, very hard. George went into a deep depression, understandably, and his drinking increased and his smoking, and he developed a severe case of hepatitis. So you can see that things were really, in a way, falling apart for George, and of course, recently divorced from his first wife as well. So all of these things, there he's trying to find, God and spirituality, and yet all of these negative things are happening to him. Olivia Trinidad Arias helped George regain his balance. She worked at George's new company, Dark Horse Records, unfortunately named after the disaster of the album. She practiced meditation, and she helped with a good diet and acupuncture. She became his companion for the rest of his life. So, in some ways, you can say that Olivia really helped George, assisted George. She herself was into meditation. She understood Indian spirituality. She knew the importance of a God consciousness. And so, she was extremely helpful to George at a time in his life when, frankly, he really needed someone to be there for him and to support him and to help him because he was dealing with so many difficult issues in his life. His fourth album, called Extra Texture, was not as obviously religious. It came out in 1975. He even saying that people should not listen to him. No one would be wise following the likes of me, a line from World of Stone. So now he's, in a way, changing his understanding of the fans. He's realizing that, they're in a different place, and that's okay. And with all of the struggles that he's been through, he says, frankly, you shouldn't listen to me. I'm just a guy who's struggling. I'm trying to find meaning in life. I'm trying to find this God consciousness. I'm trying to find the deeper spirituality. It was obvious at this point that he's still struggling with that, struggling with all of the negative things that are happening in his life. And so he says in World of Stone, no one would be wise following the likes of me. So he's taking an honest look at himself and saying, I am not a spiritual leader. I am not the person the fans should be following. They should be following those who are truly spiritual persons. I'm still struggling with it. I'm on a path. I'm on a journey. I'm not there yet. His fifth album was 33 1/3. And he took a break after that album to visit Prabhupada. And they had a wonderful exchange. And Prabhupada thanked George for all his support. And how George has spread the message of Krishna in meditation throughout the world. In November of 1977, when Prabhupada lay dying, he took off his ring and instructed that it be given to George with his blessing. So that's how much George meant to him. He found in George someone special, someone genuine, someone who was truly seeking. And he recognized that. And there he is on his deathbed. Who is he thinking of? He's thinking of George. This shows you, I think, the sincerity of George and the impact that George made on many people. George spent a lot of time at this point in his life creating beautiful gardens at Friar Park. And at this point, you can see that there's a little bit of a change in the sense that meditation is still important. He's doing that. We also see a George who's finding God in nature. He's seeing that when one creates something beautiful, one can also encounter God. So George really looking now, having gone through some difficult struggles, looking for something deeper, and you can see in sincerity that he is truly finding a deeper understanding of himself, of his fans, and deepening that spiritual connection with God, particularly in nature.